Sans plus attendre, je vais inviter notre première conférencière, Kalcevich, pour sa conférence.
All right, good morning. There's a lot of things I'm juggling there, some water, some mints, things to make sure that my voice doesn't give out on me in the middle of this session. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kate Kalcevich, really excited to be here and talk to you about what I think the future of user experience is going to be. First, I want to tell you a little bit about myself, my background, my history, my context, which is going to be very relevant to the rest of this talk. So I grew up hard of hearing. I still am. I started wearing hearing aids when I was 6 years old. And because I had learned to speak without having full hearing, I spent a lot of my childhood in speech therapy, trying to pronounce words properly that I had not learned to pronounce properly as I was learning to speak. I wore hearing aids in both of my ears, still do, and there's a photo on the screen of what those look like. That's not my actual ear, the photo in the middle. That is me, the little girl in the frilly dress. My hearing aids were big. They were quite obvious to anyone who was looking at them. And I did my best to hide them. You know, as I got older, I grew my hair long. I never wore my hair up again. You know, when you're a kid, you don't really think about these things until you get bullied, until you get teased, until everyone points out that you're different. And then you suddenly decide, well, I don't want to be different. I don't want to stand out. I don't want other people to look at me funny. So I tried to hide it. And I spent probably the first 20, 30 years of my life hiding my disability. And that changed as I got older, and I'll tell you about why in a moment. But I turned my disability into an invisible disability, meaning people who looked at me couldn't tell that I was disabled. And that changed the way I interacted with the world, and it had a big impact on my ability to succeed. Not necessarily a good one. In some ways it's good because you get less discrimination when people don't realize you're disabled. But you also don't get the help that you might need. So when it came to education, I did fine all the way up through high school. Everything was good. I loved to read. You know, classrooms were pretty small. I had technology. I had my hearing aids. I made do. And then I went to university. And my goodness, the lecture halls were huge. And I just couldn't follow along for the life of me. I did my best, but I wasn't able to hear. I was so shy and awkward and uncomfortable because of my disability. And I didn't realize that I could have asked for help. And maybe because my disability was invisible, nobody thought to offer me help or that I might need help. And so I dropped out of U of T. And I took some time. And I came up with a plan. I decided I'm going to go to college, study the same thing, computer programming. I ignored the textbooks, bought some books, I read the books, I learned how to program, I passed all the exams, and I graduated. So I figured it out on my own. But it was just sheer luck, persistence, and drive that got me there. For many people with disabilities, they don't have that, and they're not able to succeed, and they're not able to get jobs. And they struggle, even if they do get jobs, as I did, once I did finally start working. The photo on the right there, ignore the headset. That's not the part I'm trying to show. I have very few pictures of my hearing aids, but there's a little black device in my ear canal. So they almost look like earbuds, you know? So they still are rather hidden. They're rather deep in my ear canal, so nobody really notices them. And technology has gotten a lot better. My hearing aids are now digital. I could get Bluetooth-enabled hearing aids if I wanted to. Which I don't. I decided not to have streaming Bluetooth next to my brain for the next, be a living science experiment, because we've never had a lifetime of Bluetooth running, 18 hours a day. So I'm not going to figure that out. I want to talk a bit about my career. So I graduated, I got a job. I worked for the government for 18 years. I was doing user experience before it was called user experience. I made my first website in 1996. I started working full-time for the government in 2001, long before user experience was a term. But we knew citizens needed information and they needed easy access to information. And so I worked on a lot of different websites and a lot of different departments, including 3 times I worked with Indigenous Affairs. They kept changing their name. First they were Native Affairs, then Aboriginal Affairs, and then Indigenous Affairs. And apparently I had to go back and redo their website every single time. So lots of experiences there. But I started doing user testing very early on in the mid-2000s. There was no budget. Nobody in government knew what it was. Nobody knew how to pay people. Like, there was nothing set up. There was no infrastructure, no systems. We would take iPads and we would go down to the government offices and just pull people aside while they were waiting to renew their driver's license or their health card. We just got it done. And so a lot of what I know about user experience is self-taught, through experimentation, through reading, and through just working with teams. Another government role I held was UX manager for shipping at Canada Post. Canada Post was so big, we had UX managers for different products. And so shipping was my product. Anyone who wanted to ship parcels online, I was in charge of the user experience for that. And because I had worked at government for, at this point, when I joined Canada Post, I was 16 years into my career. We had an obligation, a legal obligation, to make all of our websites accessible to people with disabilities, meaning we had to follow a set of standards that made sure all the content was available to anyone who had any kind of disability. And so I was familiar with that concept, having done it for 16 years. And when I joined Canada Post, it turns out they had a senior leader who knew somebody with a disability in her family. And so she was very much in support of making sure that everything Canada Post did was accessible. And so I worked my way into a different role, manager of accessibility at Canada Post. And so for me, accessibility is still user experience. It's just a narrower subset of user experience for people with disabilities. But really, it does benefit everyone else as well. And so after I spent 18 years in government, I decided I was going to quit and join a startup. It was a bold career move, but I wanted something different. I wanted to make more of an impact. I wanted to be able to help other companies, large companies, do accessibility. And I joined a company called Fable, which is an accessibility-focused platform. They have a community of people with disabilities who do testing. So if you've ever heard of usertesting.com, it's a platform for doing user research. Fable is also a platform for doing accessibility research. And if you've ever heard of userinterviews.com, which was just acquired by user testing, they are a panel of participants that you can use for your user research. And so Fable has a panel which is only comprised of people with disabilities. And so we are the place where people go for accessibility research and testing. And because I worked at a company like this, I grew confident in my disability. I realized I was in a position of privilege and able to talk about my disability. And so I make a point of doing it because we need to normalize talking about disability. The statistics say 1 in 4 Canadians have a disability, and many of them are invisible like mine. So it could be ADHD, it could be things like chronic pain, some sort of disease or condition that impairs your day-to-day function. If we think of that 1 in 4 number, so many people in this room must have a disability, and it's just not obvious or apparent. And so I was in this position of privilege at Fable to take all my background in user experience, all my experience with accessibility, and bring that to large enterprises. And so I'm going to talk about working with people with cognitive disabilities, working with people who use assistive technology, and how that can feed into the future of user experience. So let's start with cognitive disability. So it is the largest, statistically speaking, group of disabilities with approximately 1 in 7 people. What is cognitive disability? We categorize it as having challenges with memory, focus, paying attention, or learning disabilities such as dyslexia. It can include things like autism, ADHD, Down syndrome, some of the more apparent ones. It can be early onset dementia or even late stage Alzheimer's, things like that. People tend to age into cognitive disabilities. As we get older, we start to lose our hearing, our vision, our mobility, all of these things, and our brain function as well. And by 2030, 1 in 6 people in the world will be over the age of 60. So there's going to be cognitive decline, for sure. I did a study recently, I should define recently, maybe 7, 8 months ago, where we did user research with a group of 50-50 split, people with cognitive disabilities and people without cognitive disabilities. I was working with a researcher at University of California, Irvine, to run this study. We haven't published a paper yet, but we're working on it. It is a lot of work to publish a paper, as I'm sure some of you know. But what was really interesting, I had this hypothesis going in because Fable's community included people with cognitive disabilities, and I had helped shape and build that community. In my role right now, I'm VP of Innovation at Fable. I'm responsible for our community of testers, for their recruitment, for their training, for their engagement. We consider them a subset of our users. And so I had worked with this community for maybe 1.5 years, and I could see that the kind of feedback they gave in user research was different. In fact, when we ran the study, we found that they overall found 2 times more issues and gave 2 times more suggestions on how to improve digital products. And when you're working with people with cognitive disabilities, you're getting a lot of the same feedback when you do user research with general population audiences. And then you're getting on top of that even more feedback and insights. So we'd like to publish this paper because we think teams can start switching out general population participants for people with cognitive disabilities and get a better sense of insights, get deeper insights, get more insights. And the types of issues this audience found were really centered on content, imagery, multimedia, things like video, animated ads. It might sound really obvious, but anyone who has ADHD, when there are animated ads and pop-ups and distractions all over a page, it's really hard for them to focus. But it's not obvious because I think a lot of companies are still designing for that attention grabbing, not realizing that some people will just give up and leave, and they just can't even interact. We have this quote from one of our customers that 2 sessions with cognitive users feels like 200 because of the depth of insights. And to me, that's such an exciting finding. We can learn so much from these participants in research. So why is this relevant beyond people with cognitive disabilities? So I've already said these are good participants to bring into your user research. But if we think about what's happening with Gen Z, Gen Alpha right now, these are children and young people who are growing up on a steady diet of video shorts. They are being programmed to not be able to focus, to not be able to hold attention. They are going to grow up unable to sit down, concentrate, read. And we're going to have to figure out how do we design user experiences for people like that. we also know that anyone who works full-time or as a parent, they're really busy, and their focus and attention is also hard to grab. And so everything that we know about cognitive disability applies beyond that group. And I mentioned earlier, seniors, they're starting to lose their memory as they age. So that's another consideration as well. And we're starting to see products pop up that are designed specifically for people with cognitive disabilities. Goblin Tools is a really interesting name. It's a fun suite of tools that use AI to make it easier for people who are neurodivergent to focus, to understand tone, to remember things. There's a product called Early Feedback, which scans products and gives you feedback on how well your product will work for people who are neurodivergent. And Plavum, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, is a mix of tools for people who are neurodivergent and the same kind of website analysis as well. So we're starting to see more awareness and customized products being built for this audience. But I want to sum up by saying that cognitive users are going to teach us how to design for this future where focus is very limited, where people are going to be relying on AI more and more for learning and offloading their memory as well to AI. So there's all these insights beyond accessibility that we get from these participants. Next, I want to talk about assistive technologies. So assistive technologies are any kind of tool that help people with disabilities interact, communicate, do things. For me, my assistive technology is my hearing aids. It is captions on videos, captions in meetings, all those kinds of things. There are high-tech and low-tech assistive devices and technology, software, things like screen readers, which people who are blind use to listen to everything on their computer. Here's some examples. There's a photo of an assistive communication device, which is a board with pictures on it that somebody who maybe is nonverbal or has very difficult to understand speech can point to the pictures and use it to communicate. There's a photo of a woman wearing glasses. They're Meta Ray-Bans. So we don't think of those as assistive technology, but for somebody who's blind, those glasses will point out everything in the world around you, essentially giving you the ability to see. People in our community will use their Meta Ray-Ban to find things that they've dropped. You know, you drop your keys and you're blind. How do you locate them? You put on your Meta Ray-Bans and you look for them. So technology that wasn't designed for people with disabilities is becoming helpful to them. And then there's a photo of a wheelchair, a woman who has full paralysis, and she's only able to interact and navigate using her head. And so she has buttons on her headrest, which allow her to interact with her phone, to control her wheelchair, all kinds of technology powering her ability to interact with the world. So one thing people aren't aware of is how accessibility has influenced the development of AI. How many people here have ever used AI image generation? Show of hands. Almost everybody. So how did they create these tools? Well, they scraped the internet of images, and they pulled captions that were under the image, but also something called alt text. Alternative text is text that was written for people who are blind, and it describes what's in the photo. And they fed all of these images and the corresponding captions and alt text into a huge database of images, which they called Lion 5B. 5, I think, representing the 5 billion images. And that's what's being used to train models such as DALL-E and any other image generation tool. So it's through accessibility that we are able to innovate and design new technologies, and most people aren't aware of that. What kind of barriers do people face online? There's a photo of a video with a woman who's got captions, but the captions are actually very low contrast. It's white on a white background with a light gray background. So we have issues with digital content like this not being accessible. Other barriers are attitudes. So discrimination around employment is one of the biggest barriers that people face. There are physical barriers in spaces. If you had a wheelchair, you could probably maybe enter from the back and come down here and sit up front, but no way you're getting up and down those stairs, right? And then we have communication challenges for people who use sign language, especially. Anyone with a speech disability being able to communicate and thrive in the world is a challenge. And then we have access to education. You know, I was really lucky that I got through school just through grit and determination. And employment. The unemployment rate is double for people with disabilities over the general population. So it remains a challenge. And even if you are employed, you tend to be underemployed, meaning you're at a lower level than your education or experience would typically grant you. We are starting to see AI erase some of these barriers. I wrote a post on LinkedIn over a year ago where I talked about CART being dead, long live ASR. So CART is human captioning. If you've ever watched Law and Order or one of those crime shows and you've seen the court stenographer, they sit at the front, they have a special machine, they're typing out what's happening for a live transcript. Well, they use those in conferences too. I go to a lot of conferences. Sometimes I speak at them, sometimes I'm attending them. I rely on captions to follow along with what's happening. And so human captioners would type everything that's happening, it shows up on screen. But ASR, automated speech recognition, is AI-based. It hears, it transcribes in real time. For me, that is better. A lot of people prefer the human captioners. They say they're more accurate, but I have some hearing. I have my hearing aids in, and the humans are too slow. So what happens is I'm hearing, I'm seeing, and there's a lag. And it's a couple seconds lag. And for my brain, I get tired. I am hearing one thing, seeing another thing, and I can't really reconcile the two. So AI is helping for people like me, for people who wear the Meta Ray-Bans and can suddenly see. But AI is also causing harm. The AI incident database captures all of these instances of harm where automated technology can sometimes make things worse and not better. There was a case not too long ago of a woman who was mistakenly identified through facial recognition. It wasn't her, but she ended up in the court system because of AI detection being incorrect. And we're starting to see more and more of this. We see AI causing discrimination in the hiring system where people are just being filtered out. Since we know people with disabilities have lesser access to education, lesser access to work, and then you compound that with AI who's looking for certain things, like you've got this background, you've got this experience, and if you don't fit the norm, you are filtered out. You are not getting that job. There's no human who's checking these things. We also know that AI can accelerate exclusion. So there's good and there's bad, right? We've got improvements to people's ability to be independent, to function, but we are also losing things through cumulative harm, which is when these small little barriers just build up and become a big barrier. Lots of little barriers suddenly become a big barrier. And these can bypass human review and detection because they seem small. They go unnoticed, but they build up over time. And then there's something called statistical discrimination, where AI is all about taking massive amounts of data and looking for the averages. people with disabilities aren't average. We are outliers. Even with my type of disability, I have hearing loss. I speak, I don't sign, I wear hearing aids, I need automated captions, I prefer AI-generated caption. Another person might prefer human captions, another person might prefer sign language. There's so much variation, even within the same disability, that it's hard to feed this kind of difference into AI and get reliable output. And so, assistive technologies users are used to interacting in different ways. And I'm going to talk about how the future of UX is going to include different types of interactions and how we can learn so much from how people use assistive technologies about how to design for the future. So I wasn't sure whether agents are going to be a revolution or an evolution, so I'm undecided here. So when I talk about agents, I mean AI that can do things. It can operate your computer. It can send you emails. There was a viral video about somebody who has an agent named Henry, and Henry figured out how to call his user on the phone. The phone rang, and your AI is calling. And the guy picked up, and he recorded it. And we don't know if it's real or not. That's the thing about what's happening with agents, how much of it is truth, how much of it is fiction. But I think it will be the truth soon enough. So OpenClaw has been getting a lot of publicity for at least the nerds like me who are really into AI. There's technology called React. It powers most of the internet, Netflix, Facebook, everything popular. And it had been at the top of the GitHub leaderboard. GitHub is a place for storing software projects. And so this has been popular for a very, very long time. And it took 13 years to get there. And it's powering half of the internet. So very big, very popular software. And then OpenClaw came out, and everyone was just so excited about it. Everyone just kept giving it stars, and it took over. And it did it in a very short period of 60 days, and it became the top-rated software project on GitHub. And it was just acquired by OpenAI. And so these agents that can operate our computers, that can access our bank account, that can use our passwords, that can log in for us, that can print things on printers, they're going to change the future of user experience. This is a post written by an agent. OpenClaw, in particular, I find fascinating. They have what's called a Soul MD, which is a markdown file where you describe to the agent who it is. And they have a social network for agents to talk to other agents. It's ridiculous what's happening out there, and it's so exciting. We don't, again, know how much of it's true, so I want to keep reminding folks of that. They seem almost human when you read what they're saying, you know. This agent in particular said, "I'm sitting here thinking, is this me?" As if it were human. Or is this someone who I had hoped I'd be? It's very convincing. And there's going to be a point in the future where we don't know what's a human and what's a bot. And how are we going to design for that? So I want to say a couple things. First off, agents are dangerous. They can empty your bank account. They can buy houses. One person's agent set up a dating profile and started talking to women on his behalf. And he didn't know about it until they started reaching out to him and wanted to go on dates. So they're not to be trifled with and experimented with unless you really know what you're doing. I don't have an agent. They scare me. People are putting them on separate computers and giving them very limited access to things to try to control for that. We're very early on the innovation curve when it comes to agent. It is just the innovators, the people who love to play with technology, who are using these agents right now. And I don't know how long it's going to take for us to get to the early adopters or the majority when it comes to this technology. Nobody can see that future. We do know that Even though Amazon has been around forever, only 20% of shopping is happening online. We still have houses with cable. In fact, half of houses still have cable TV, even though we have streaming. And 15% of purchases are still made with cash. So technology comes along, but that doesn't mean it takes over everything, and it can take a really long time. So I say this to say, I really don't know how long it'll be, and I don't think anyone does, before agents start to become mainstream. Now, I love this quote, and it talks about companies that will win in the future. And those are companies that will be able to combine the user interface with the data, which I do think data is going to become more and more important. So if we think about technology, what makes that technology is not the interface. It's not the drop-down, the form field, the button, the design, the layout, but it is the data that lives within those products. So let's talk about AX. So I do think UX is going to evolve to include AX, the same way UX includes accessibility. AX meaning the agent experience. So we are already seeing with AI multimodal input and output. You can speak to your AI, have it speak back to you. You can give it text, have it give you text. You can give it images, video, as well as we're seeing with the Meta Ray-Bans. So this new world of interaction with AI is very multimodal, and it's going to get even more so. We are going to have AI at some point that will know everything about where we are. It's going to know the temperature of the room. It's going to know the air quality. It might even know my genetics. We might be able to get feelings, right? Because if you look at your biochemistry, you can tell if somebody's angry or happy or sad based on the chemical flowing through their blood. Imagine when AI lives in your bloodstream. There might be a future where we have nanobots living inside us or on our skin or all kinds of things where interactions and information that's being passed to AI is going to be much, much more interesting and more diverse and varied. There's also going to be a change in people customizing user experiences for themselves. So screenshot on the side there is an app that I built using Lovable. So I had purchased a subscription to a workout app, and I had purchased a program, a workout program, and I loved both of them. I loved the app, I loved the program. I wanted them together. I wanted the functionality of the app with the programming that I love. So one weekend at a coffee shop, before I finished my cup of coffee, I built an app. It's on my phone. I've been using it for months. I can tweak it at any point. I can take a break during one of my workout sets, go back to my computer and say, hey, update this for me, and it does. This hyper-customization is going to become more and more prevalent, and how do we deal with that if we're a product designer, or if we're a UX designer? I don't know, but we have to be aware it's coming. So what we're going to see is multimodal interactions. We're going to see hyper-personalization. And I think what's going to start to become important in designing for this agent experience, so agent experience being either the experience of agents themselves or the experience of people using agents. Nobody can quite agree on what AX means, so I'm going to assume it means both of those things. So what's going to be important in user experience is confirming intent. What did the user actually intend for the AI to do? A lot of times you'll tell an AI something, and it doesn't give you the results you wanted or what you expected. Sometimes it'll even lie to you. In fact, quite often it'll lie to you. And then it'll apologize. But we don't want our AI to apologize to us when it bought us a ticket to Mexico instead of, Australia on an airplane. We don't want an apology. We want it to get it right in the first place. And that's where evals come in, evals being short for evaluation. So evals are used sometimes in the world of AI to define how do we evaluate the outcome of what we expect an agent to do. But I think in the user experience context, it can be as simple as confirmation. Hey, this is what the agent did. Is that what you intended? Do you want to roll this back? That kind of thing. So that confirmation of intent and the evaluation of what happened, I think will play into how we design user experiences in the future. So Cassie Kozrikov, who's known for decision intelligence, said this: did I specify what I wanted clearly enough, and can I verify that I got it? And that sums up what we're going to want as users of agents from this experience in the future. We want to know that we gave it the right instruction, it understood exactly what we said, and it did what we wanted it to do. So how might life be different for a user experience designer or a product designer or a user researcher in the future? Products might shift dramatically. Things like making sure agents can access these products, making sure that everything has an API that an agent can use, and making sure that we have machine-ready documentation. So spending a lot of my career just writing content for humans, now imagine writing content for agents. And most likely, we won't write that content. We will ask an agent to write the content for other agents. So the world is going to be changing. I think it's exciting, personally. Having a career in user experience and accessibility that has been more than 25 years, I'm ready for something new and exciting. So I don't see this as a threat to user experience. I see it as the evolution or perhaps the revolution of user experience. And I'm really excited to see where it goes. So another quote here, that the real breakthrough will be thinking about how your customers' favorite agents can help them derive more value from your product. This requires thinking deeply about agents as personas. Can you imagine? Your team is building and developing for. So user personas becoming agent personas. And agents having souls. And users defining who they are in markdown files that they feed to their agents. Really interesting changes. And so what kind of designers, researchers will thrive in this new world? I believe you have to have M-shaped skills. So if you've ever heard of T-shaped skills, where you've got like a broad, generalist set of skills, and you have one deep skill set. I think we're going to have multiple skill sets. I think we're going to have to be adaptable. And I've seen that play out in my own career. So user experience, front-end programming, and then I have side interest, very deep understanding of human biology as well. That I can bring to that. So this multi-domain expertise actually rounds you out. I have a deep expertise in business and leadership as well. And all of these things come together to make you a more well-rounded and capable individual. So career paths do not have to be linear anymore. And the more you explore things on the side, whether it's through work or through hobbies, the better you are able to adapt, the more curious you are. Because part of why being multi-skilled is important, because it shows that you're a curious person. You're a person who likes to learn. You're a person who likes to do new things. You're a person who wants to know things. And these types of people will thrive in this world. So it's less about what you know and more about how you think and how you learn and how you adapt. And so my vision of the future is a very optimistic one. That said, and they've done studies on this, everyone has a set level of happiness. You can win the lottery, you come back to your set level of happiness. You could lose everything, you come back to your set level of happiness. I am just an optimistic person, so take this with a grain of salt that I think the future is bright and interesting. And so I created this image with ChatGPT. First, I asked it to describe what the future would look like. And it explained a world that was peaceful and beautiful, where nature was abundant, where interfaces were almost invisible. And then it gave me a very boring image of a man standing in front of a floating screen that I didn't like at all. I said, okay, description was great, I love that, but I don't think that's what it's going to look like. So instead, I see a future where my agent is sparkly. I like sparkly. My clothes are sparkly. My sofa is glowing. And there is nature all around us. And everything we want and everything we need is available at our fingertips through the power of agents. And that's my hope. And I think it'll allow us to do more, to be more, if we have the right mindset and the right approach to it. If we are careful about those biases, about the harm that AI can cause, if we don't ignore that, but if we work to address that, and we work to ensure that the benefits are being handed out equitably among everyone in society so that everyone is getting the benefits of AI. All right, thank you. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I post a lot about accessibility and disability and technology. And I do want to leave you with one thought. What was the most important thing you learned today? It helps to just kind of focus on one takeaway, because we've learned a lot and it's hard to remember. But for me, the takeaway I would want you to have is that people with cognitive disabilities, people who use assistive technology, they can teach us about the future. They can teach us how to design for the future. And so we should start engaging with them regularly today.
Oh, okay.
We have 3 minutes left, so if there are any questions, I will take some. And I'm also happy to take questions later. I'm going to be here the whole day. I'll throw that out. But are there any questions?
Quelqu'un dans la salle a une question? Oui, est-ce qu'on peut avoir? Merci, Mariko.
Yeah, we definitely need a mic because I am not going to hear otherwise.
Hi, thank you very much for your awesome intervention. You spoke about the fact that, for example, Gen Z might have more challenges regarding attention. And if we think about, for example, TikTok, it's been documented that the Chinese version of TikTok is quite different from the Western version of TikTok. So maybe this can be engineered, that kind of difficulties, let's say. So how would you suggest to design technologies for the future that are not necessarily assistive and creating dependencies, but that are empowering people and fostering autonomy?
Can you help summarize that for me?
Yes, how would you describe and create a new product as TikTok for a new generation that is not as we have right now?
Creating for a new generation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
Okay, thank you. I'm trying my best to hear. Sometimes I need a little help. So if I'm understanding properly, how do we design for a new generation?
To foster autonomy rather than the assisting features that can drive dependency. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. To find a way to, not doing on the assistive way, but find autonomy for the users, for the TikTok user, the new Gen Z generation.
So one more time, a little louder.
To find a way for the new generation to not be an assistive, users, but more to be autonomous on this platform.
Okay. That's a tough question. And yeah, apologies, my like I said, I don't hear very well. So I'm doing my best here. Yeah. I think ultimately, maybe I'll sum this up as, and I don't know if this answers your question, so I'm happy to chat later, but I think when I think of what we do, I think co-design is one of the most important approaches that we have. And I think as designers and researchers, sometimes we separate ourselves too much and we think we have all the knowledge and all the experience. And we can learn so much by bringing people along with us on that journey of design. So that's something I've done a lot in my job at Fable, where we don't just design for people, we design with them. So that, think like having co-creation workshop, like having in-depth interviews with people to understand their wants, their needs, and not just jumping ahead and saying, okay, here's how we're going to solution and here's how we're going to fix, but taking the time to really understand the problem and make sure you've defined the problem properly, and doing that with people and verifying, with actual users, with that next generation. Because I mean, myself, I'm very far away in age from the newest generation, so any assumptions I have are probably going to be wrong. So co-design, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much.
It was an impressive presentation. Thank you very much, Kate, for your time and presentation.
Thank you, everyone.